Welcome to the Pharsyde channel. This is our series of business owner challenges. And today I am chatting to the amazing Mo Mamele. Mo, welcome.
What up?
So awesome
Fantastic.
to see you today.
Yes, I'm very excited. I'm really excited for our conversation today. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm looking forward to our chat and talking about business challenges.
Yeah, and you've had a few, haven't you? So tell us, first of all, what you are busy with at the moment.
So at the moment, so obviously I'm a full-time entrepreneur, but I'm one of those kids with, like multiple hats and fingers and one or two pies. So I've got a tech company. That is my new baby. It's like a COVID baby, but we specifically work with e-commerce technology, and we work with informal traders in townships and rural communities, and we basically help them leverage technology, specifically e-commerce technology, to build and grow their businesses. And help alleviate, their challenges. Our vision is to digitize informal economies across Africa, leveraging e-commerce technology. So that's what I'm busy with at the moment. That's the project that pins and grays my hair. But it's certainly one of my favorite projects at the moment, because of the impact that it has in local communities. And then when I'm not doing that, most people would know that I'm also a poet and a writer. So I do poetry and that kind of stuff. So yeah.
That is so cool. I love it. I love the fact that you do tech as your job, and then in your free time you go do something as old school and meaningful, creative as poetry. I just think it's such an amazing dichotomy that you show in your personality.
Yeah. No, that's very true. Most people are actually very sort of surprised, because I always feel like I'm always teeter-tottering between multiple different worlds. Because there's a side of me where people only know me as an entrepreneur and as a businesswoman, and that's what I do, that's who I am. And then when they hear that I do poetry, it's like, what? And then there's a side of me where people know me as a poet, and I'm a youth mentor. I love working with young people. So one of my other projects is being a youth mentor. And my other life, people know me as a poet, as a writer, as like a creative. And then when they hear that I've actually got a very heavy business background, in fact, my qualification is in finance and accounting. It's like mind blowing. They're like, wait, what now? Say that again. So that's me.
I particularly, because as an accountant, I know how many accountants are actually scared of technology. So for me, when I first heard you had this accounting background and now you're running a technology company, I was like, now that alone is this massive jump. I couldn't believe it. And then I was like, and then you also do poetry for fun. So you're just gonna throw the rule book out there and just be completely different from what everyone expects. It's amazing.
Basically.
With so many things happening, I'm going to guess that one of your challenges is time management. How do you manage your energy and your time?
Well, that's a very good question. And I don't know how to answer it because I don't know if I manage my time. Wow. I honestly speaking, I think one thing, that I realize is that I feel like I live in a constant state of overwhelm, because it's almost like I always say, the more you do, the more you realize the more needs to get done. It's like it's never done. After this meeting, there's another meeting, there's feedback from that meeting, then we have to follow up and do the work and rewrite the proposal. And so the more you do, the more that you actually realize needs to get done. So I generally just try and focus on getting stuff done. But I try to focus more on execution. I love to-do lists. I try to write a to-do list down and sort of systematically get through stuff during my day. It's not perfect. Certainly some days are better than others. Some days are more productive than others, and so forth. But that's generally what I try to do. I try to focus on just getting stuff done. Knock the balls back is always how I think about it. If you play a game of tennis, I always think of it as like, just knock it back. Just knock the ball back, send that email, send the proposal, and then now it's in the other person's court to feedback and to action the next steps. So that's generally how I try to manage my time and get stuff done.
That's very cool. I mean, I suppose there's no other way to do it when you have so many balls like in the air at one time. I really am. I personally am in awe of how much you actually manage to get done. You know, whenever we do manage to catch up, you've always achieved something new, and it's really amazing to see.
This is why I live in a constant state of overwhelm, because it's always like, it's gotta get done, it's gotta get done. And then just as you finish with that thing, somebody else calls and it's like, oh yeah, remember that thing we spoke about 1 month ago? Now it's happening. So are you available on this date? And that's also one of the challenges with being client facing, is that if a client calls now and they need stuff done, like you have to make a plan, you know, which is why I focus on just getting stuff done and less on, you know, sort of like thinking and planning too much. It's like, it's gotta, you know, like you can have all the best lead plans in the world, but if you're not getting stuff done, all you have is dossiers and dossiers of great strategies and things, but you've got nothing to show for it tangibly. And so that's kind of where I try to come at things, especially when I'm feeling overwhelmed or anxious about the work and how much needs to get done. I try to take a step back and just focus on just knocking out those balls, you know, reducing my, like little things like just reducing my emails to a manageable level, reducing my WhatsApps to a manageable level, just knock the balls back. So yeah, it seems to be working thus far.
That's amazing. So tell me, I'm also not huge on planning in general, or at least putting, you know, hours and hours and hours of planning. But I have in recent years realized the value of stopping for half an hour and going, where do I actually want my business to go? And how are we going to get there? So how do you fit that in? Like, you don't want to have, as you say, these dossiers of plans that don't happen, but you also want to have that overarching view of what your purpose is and what you're trying to achieve. How do you fit that into your amazingly busy day?
So there's a bit of a balance, right, that you kind of have to strike. From a scheduling perspective, what I've now done over like the last 2 months now, what I've now done with my schedule is that I have made a decision on which days I'm going to take meetings and which days I'm not. And so what that helps me with is to allow myself to prepare for meetings and have days where I'm having meetings. But you know, when you're having meetings, you don't actually get a lot of work done. You're just in meetings taking notes and you don't actually get work done. And I always say that work doesn't get done in meetings. At best, what happens in the meeting, you leave the meeting with work to do, right? Because there's next steps. We've spoken about the plan, how we need to tweak it, what the client has said, or what the tech is saying, and all that stuff. So now there's next steps that need to be actioned away from you know, the meeting. So work doesn't get done in meetings. So if I'm sitting in meetings, you know, day in, day out, I'm not actually getting any work done. The work is actually piling up. So I've decided to just have days where these are the days where I'm open for meetings, and then the rest of the week I'm not. And I'm not available the rest of the week for meetings. That's part of how I've also structured that. I'm also trying to push my life more in the direction of a 4-day work week, because philosophically, I just don't understand why out of 7 days, we only have 2 to rest. So like from a philosophical perspective in the way that I approach work as an ideology, I've had to relook at how we understand work as a society. It just doesn't make sense to me that the 7 days in the week, we're forced to work 5 but only rest for 2. So I struggle with that from an ideological perspective. So I'm trying to also push my life in such a way that, you know, I have a 3-day weekend and a 4-day work week. And that's where sort of the balance sort of comes into play. And to answer your question, that kind of also gives my brain time to rest. And to solve problems without being in front of a computer, without actively trying to solve the problem, you know, to see opportunities that you will not be able to see if you're standing in front of the opportunity, because you've lost perspective, you're too close to it. So that allows me to sort of think about the business from, you know, a more strategic level versus just always being in it from an execution perspective. But now that being said, you know, you you realize the importance as you start to build a business, the importance of documenting things. Things can't always sit in your head. There needs to be a document somewhere, and you need to unpack stuff from your brain. And so you have to strike a balance, right, of things that are in your head and things that are going to be documented and things that are going to happen now. And that's the one thing I've learned over the last couple of months, is that not everything we wanted to happen at this point in time has happened, even though there's a nice document with a really good plan about how it's going to be executed. But it hasn't all happened in the time frame we've wanted it to happen. But the cool thing is that the plans are there.
Yes.
The plans are there, the commitment is there, and we know where we're taking the business. It just hasn't happened the timeline we wanted it to, but it's documented, it's committed to, and we're just trusting and relying on the process. But you trust the process and it will happen organically, right? So that's sort of how I balance, thinking, I think, working on the business versus working in the business. Mm-hmm. And you need that time to sort of sometimes walk away from your business and let it breathe. So you can see it for what it is. All right. So that's sort of my perspective on that. That's how I generally balance, the more strategic thinking that needs to go into the business.
I think that's brilliant.
That was a mouthful.
But it was brilliant. It was brilliant, mindful. And you highlighted, I think, two very important things, when it comes to business building. And the one is that you need to take a step back. You need to take time off. Because I think so many business owners, and particularly small business, when you're trying to get it off the ground, and you are everything. You're doing everything, and you're learning things you never even knew you needed to know to run the business in the first place, because you didn't even know that business management came with those things. You get so overwhelmed by these huge numbers of tasks and things, and it just becomes so busy. And we think we can't afford to take time off. We can't afford our weekends. We can't afford our holidays. We can't afford a lunch break. And actually, you can't afford not to. You can't afford to not take that step back, rest your brain, rest your thoughts, rewire the way you're looking at things. And then you can come back to those problems. You can come back to those issues with a renewed perspective and do better. Than if you'd push through, and that's it's really important. I love the idea of I know it's not your idea, the 4-day work week, but I love the fact that you're focusing on the 4-day work week and trying to make that happen. I think that's it's if you're in a business where it works, then it's definitely one to try and pursue, because I think it's better for us overall as human beings, as you say, to have more of that balance of life and work and getting things done.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the cool things about being an entrepreneur, especially at a foundational level when you're starting things out, is the fact that you as daunting as it looks, the cool thing is that you now have an opportunity to build things the way you believe they should be built or they should be done, which sounds it's a very outlandish vision, because you are but one business but one person operating in a larger ecosystem, right? So you can't be like, I'm just going to work a 4-day work week and then expect everyone to for it to always work that way. There will obviously be concessions here and there, but because you're starting it yourself and you're building something from nothing, who's to say that your Monday can't be a Sunday, right? And your Thursday is the Friday because you start your week. Who's to say? Because everyone is away on the Sunday. So who's to say your Monday can't be on a Sunday and your Tuesday is our Monday? And then you have flexibility within that structure, within that framework, but you have a framework that works for you. And I think that's one of the cool things with COVID as well. I mean, with people working from home and whatnot, you hear stories of, parents who tell you that I get the most done from 8 p.m. till 1 in the morning because I've cooked, kids are asleep and everything. So that's my most productive hour of my day. And so who's to say that if you're an entrepreneur, you can't build your life around what works for you, and then during the day you're dropping off kids, you're taking care of the family, and you're in and out of meetings and whatnot. Then your working sessions are from 8 at night till midnight and so forth. So I think that's one of the cool things that needs to be embraced more. And I've decided to embrace it a bit more to be there's all these other difficult things about being an entrepreneur. the one cool thing is that my schedule is for the most part my schedule. Then I just work it around my clients' schedules and the deliverables I need to deliver. But outside of that, it's largely my schedule. So I've decided I'm going to just embrace that.
That is amazing. That's cool. So that is the difference between building yourself a job, which is what most small business owners do, and building an actual business, which is something that can exist by itself and supports your lifestyle, supports you, that you run, as opposed to you're stuck in and it runs you.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That's the goal of every business owner. We don't always get there. You know, we always open this business thinking we're going to have more money, have more freedom. And instead we find ourselves totally entrenched in running a business, and it's quite hectic.
It's the opposite. It ends up actually being the opposite. I always say to young entrepreneurs that if you go into entrepreneurship with the idea or the vision of being your own boss, you should not go into entrepreneurship, because that is actually a myth. There are very few. It's a myth that you are your own boss, because if you have a business, at the very least, you've got customers or you've got clients that pay you to do what they want you to do. And in a way, those guys are your bosses, right? You know, like, so if you go into entrepreneurship thinking, I'm going to be my own boss and I'm going to be able to dictate everything all the time, you're in for a very rude and painful awakening. It's not. In fact, I'd say everybody else is the boss. You're just the guy that owns the company. But the employees are your bosses, because you have to pay them, you have to take care of them, you have to manage them, like you have to worry about them and everything. So they, in a way, are your boss because you answer to them in some ways. Your clients are also your bosses because you answer to them in some ways. Your customers, your suppliers, your vendors, strategic partners, your network. The entire ecosystem that it takes to actually get your business to where you want it to go. Everybody in that ecosystem, all those stakeholders are actually your boss. And so you realize that, you know, it's not like the way people think it is. I'm just going to do whatever the hell I want because I have the business.
No, it's really not. Really, really not. Yeah, it takes time to build that business, that true business where you can move into the position where you have that freedom. It takes a lot of time to build something like that, you know, and some people don't, you know, and it also depends on you and your personality as to what you really want. If you enjoy being in the thick of things, then you actually have to start looking at hiring someone to run the business so you can be in the thick of things. You know, if you actually like going, you know, high level view and being the CEO and the visionary, then you've got to hire people to do the work that you've been doing yourself for all this time. And if you go real entrepreneur down the road and you want to open more than one business, then you have to you know, learn how to be a shareholder as opposed to being a director or an owner, which is again a totally different role. So it's a very interesting ride. Building a business.
I mean, I'm sure you're going through the same thing right now, you know, in a different way, but I'm sure you're going through similar phases right now with the business builder and all the other stuff that you're birthing right now, right? Outside of the original business or everything else. So you're also like learning how to juggle and to shuffle and, you know, and I mean, starting something from nothing, even though you've done it before, you have a successful business. That's a new baby. It's a whole new ball game. So it's a new entity, right? That you have to, you know, capacitate and build from scratch and so forth. And so now your role kind of also it morphs and it changes from just being this person with the business. Yeah, I've got this interest, I've got that interest, but this one's a different interest. And so different strategies need to be played at, and it's a different time from when you started your first business. Times have changed, tech has changed, you know, everything, the market is completely different. So it's almost like you're starting afresh, right? In a lot of ways, despite the fact that you have all that background, but in a lot of ways, you're starting from scratch. And so you're also adapting and learning as you go. And
you never stop learning.
So that's just how the cookie crumbles.
You never stop learning.
You never. That's true. I mean, in this world, you can't, eh? The world is changing so fast. You cannot, if you're not learning, you're becoming irrelevant, eh? You're being obsolete.
Absolutely,
Um,
and fast.
yeah, and I mean, I can imagine, as I was thinking about this earlier on today, I think you alluded to it earlier in our session when you were talking about accountants being scared of technology. And that's, I think, accounting and like financial management and budget control, like the whole finance space is one that is also being disrupted by technology. In a way that is making certain roles that 5 years ago we never thought we'd be debating a role, in accounting and in finance. Today it's like, well, do you really need to have that person? Because the software does it faster and easier, you know? So the role, of an accountant or of a bookkeeper is very different from what it was several years ago, because the technology is now doing some of that work for us.
Yeah.
So the industry itself is it's changing, right?
Oh, sorry, Mo. I think we lost signal for a second. Are you
Yeah, no,
back?
go for it.
I think no.
Yeah,
Sorry, because I
I'm
think
back. Go for it.
talked over each other. I was just saying what's so interesting about the bookkeeper accountant thing, with the changing with the tech, is we've actually had to become more skilled, not less skilled, because now you've got tech doing the easy stuff. So we've got to learn how to use that tech, make sure it's doing it correctly. So we have to understand that stuff in the background to know that what it's spitting out is right. And then how do you use that going forward? How do you, as the business owner, actually use that information? So it's made some jobs obsolete. It's changed others completely. It's taken others to a different level. So and that's going to keep happening in every industry, in every sphere as we move forward.
Yeah. And for me, that's what excites me, right? And I think there's as an entrepreneur, one of our mandates, and I use that loosely, but one of our mandates as entrepreneurs is to create jobs. And in markets like ours here in South Africa, and in most informal markets where you still have a lot of sort of informal labor and blue collar workers, there's massive fear about how technology is going to make those jobs obsolete, right? So classic example is a physical dishwasher versus an actual dishwasher, right? So now the job of the person washing the dishes is obsolete because I'm just going to buy a machine. So the same bookkeeper, I'm just going to buy the software and I don't need the bookkeeper. So there's mass fear about the more we embrace technology, then more obsolete. So you think about how, in parts of, in parts of Europe and, the States and whatnot, the role of a cashier, for example, is becoming increasingly obsolete. A robot can now do it, and so there's huge fear about that in South Africa, and I like, especially, in the entrepreneurial circles. But my perspective is technology is the future. Technology is great. We've all seen how technology applied properly and responsibly can actually improve the lives of everybody. So we shouldn't be running away from technology and trying to keep our markets blue collar and keep our labor markets blue collar. What we should be doing, embracing technology and upskilling our people that they are relevant in a digital economy, in a digital age, right? Because the jobs will still be there, like you said, the jobs will still be there because we still need to interpret this information and that it's actually correct and makes sense. Somebody needs to have build in intelligence, right? And take the data and make it insights that we can actually build a strategy upon. That only a human being can do that, right? A computer cannot do that 100%. They don't understand the context. well, yeah, at the moment. But I don't see, because there's certain context that a computer is going to miss at some point. But they'll be able to do it to a particular point. But you're still going to need the human element, to come into play and be like, oh, okay, fine. This is how we implement and how we execute the data or the insights. And I'll give you a classic example of how all of these opportunities, but it's really dependent on how you see it and what your perspective is. But a classic example is the Poppy Act. So the Poppy Act is like it's a big deal now in South Africa. Everyone's talking about it. especially when it launched, it's such a big deal. Every WhatsApp group we were in had a message from Alan saying, guys, because of Poppy, I'm going to send this message so that you can opt into the group. If you don't want to be in the group, you can leave now. So everybody was covering their bases, right? And so, because it was such a big deal. But the cool thing about what I realized is a whole new industry in law and in tech and in software, because now there are lawyers who now specifically do privacy policies, and they do the Poppy Act and how you be compliant and that kind of stuff. There are people who actually just niche themselves in privacy compliance. So it actually created a whole new industry that 5 years, 10 years ago didn't really actually exist, right? And now there's software. So people, now even the IT guys are building software to make privacy policy compliance easier and more transparent for businesses, and so this stuff didn't exist even 5 years ago. These jobs didn't exist. This industry didn't exist, and now it does. So if you think of it that way, then you think of all the other jobs that are going to exist because technology is changing the current sort of employment market, and blows my mind. But it's all dependent on your perspective, and do you choose to see opportunity, or do you choose to see disruption as destruction, or do you choose to see it as construction of a new way of doing things and a new way of living? But that's just philosophical Mo speaking.
I love it. I love that perspective. It should all be about growth, though, isn't it? I mean, we're supposed to continually grow as people, as business owners, as companies, as industries, and that's what it's about. Is you bring in something new, and you hope that it elevates your profession and it elevates what you're producing for your clients. That's what we're hoping for. And as you say, when you bring in that new thing, there's going to be a whole bunch of new needs that arise around that new, whether it is tech or a service or a regulation. There are going to be new things that arise, and people need to fill those roles. So yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah. So upskill the people, is my perspective. Just upskill your people. That's all that's all we really need to do as a society. Just upskill our labor force, and everything will be fine, because the jobs will still be there. You just need to make sure that you are relevant, and that's where the whole continuous learning thing comes in. If you think about, I think I realized a year after leaving varsity that majority of the stuff that I learned in varsity was irrelevant, because the world is so different. And it changes. So I look at some of the things that kids are learning in varsity and in school, and I'm like, great, learn it, because you have to learn it and get your degree. But just know that a year into you being an actual adult and working, all of the stuff you learned will be irrelevant. The technologies will be different. The software will be different. The market economies will be different. There'll be new trends and new philosophies that are introduced into the working world that you now have to grapple with. You didn't study. You must not study them as a working person. Do so that you can do your job and so forth. So continuous learning, I think, is really more of a culture. It's a way of, and if you're not doing that, then you're increasingly becoming obsolete and irrelevant at a faster rate than ever before.
Yeah, it's true. It's very true. And I mean, even when I speak to people who have just finished their degrees and entered the working world, it doesn't seem to matter what industry it is. I find that people say that what they learned in textbooks it's not how things work in real life. So even if it hasn't changed drastically, you've still got to learn how it works in the real world.
Yeah. I think that's probably the crappiest thing about education as it is right now, is that it's still, it's not realistic. It's not what realistically happens in the workplace, in the industry. And then you then have to just navigate those waters yourself.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. So Mo, that's been such a cool talk. I really enjoyed that. So I'm gonna loop back to challenges quickly, because what has been the biggest business building challenge that you feel you solved in building your business?
Do you mean solved for me, like internally for the business, or for my clients?
Oh, it can be for a client. It can be for a client.
The biggest business, what was the term? I like the way you said it, business building challenge that I've solved. I have to say it's a lack of resources. I initially would have said a lack of funding, but funding is too myopic of a term, because every entrepreneur wants funding, and then it's like, to do what with, and then they can't answer the question.
Yep.
Right, because everyone wants money, and then it's like, then what you gonna do with it? And it's like, I want to build a business. Doing what? then it's like, no, we're gonna build the business, no access to markets. So then like it's like generic business terms. So I won't say funding, I'll say resources, because then funding falls under that. But I'll say the lack of resources, like necessary and required resources to build a business and make it sustainable. That's probably one thing that I've been able to solve. Especially when you come from backgrounds where you don't have a lot of you don't really have a lot of resources or a lot of support, and you're starting something from nothing with really nothing. You've got the clothes on your back and the petrol in your car, and the brain and all the IP that you hold in there, right? And then you have to unravel all that IP and everything you've seen in the market and all your work experience, and try and put all those things together in a meaningful way for your business. And so the lack of resources is and it's a painful one, because we don't all come from the same backgrounds, right? So sometimes the lack of resources can actually be the reason why people don't achieve to their potential, because they started off at a deficit, and so forth. But I think that's probably one thing that I've been able to solve, and I think we've done pretty well. Case in point is starting a tech company without a tech background. Myself and my business partner don't have a tech background.
Amazing.
You start a tech company, and then you go into e-commerce, and you don't have an e-commerce background. I've got a marketing background, a business background, a finance background, traditional retail. So I've got a background in some, in like normal and traditional retail. Don't have a background in tech or e-commerce, but now we've got a tech platform and everything. We're building our second iteration of the platform and so forth. So it's all about perspective, I think. It's about where others see a problem, do you go a step further and see a solution, right? Because there's a problem and we can all see it. But do you stop at the problem, or do you like, okay, fine, this is the problem, we've articulated it correctly, everybody agrees, yes, we agree, we know what the problem is, now what's the solution?
Yes.
And I think sometimes, people stop at the problem because the problem seems a bit overwhelming and daunting, and then you don't go into what the solution could be. So I think that's sort of I think it's a thing that we've done very well in most of the businesses that I've had. We've done that very well, and so that's something that's really sort of I would say is our superpower. It's like, okay, we can find a way. Who do we need to talk to? What kind of conversations do we need to have? How do you negotiate? How do you compromise? How do you find a win-win? I always say collaboration is better than competition. And one thing I've realized is when you don't have the resources and you need people to lend you theirs, collaboration is better than competition is a great philosophy to walk into the room with.
It really is, though. It
just warms the room up. Everyone's like, okay, we'll help you out.
And the thing with that, I also really believe in collaboration, and I see no point in competing with people in my industry when there's more than enough clients, there's more than enough work. So, and we're all trying to get ahead. So rather, let's help each other get ahead and share it all. To me, that makes so much more sense. And especially when you talk about continuous growth and learning, if you can collaborate with people who are just that little bit further than you, you're also going to learn from them about how they got there. And you can help the person just a little bit behind you, get further along, and it just keeps improving. So I think it's fantastic. Yeah. I really think. But you also, it's interesting when I said to you, what biggest challenge have you solved? And you asked me for yourself or for your clients. And you've answered that because you've solved it for yourself, but actually that is what you solve for your clients as well, isn't it? You deal with people with very poor backgrounds, they have massive lack of resources facing them. They come from, I mean, many of your clients are opening businesses from in townships.
Yeah.
And you're offering them a resource that helps them grow, which I think is amazing.
Thank you for that. You know, there's you remind me of a quote. I think it's by not Buffett, Richard Branson. And this is another thing when I think about the problems we've been able to solve. So I think I'm going to paraphrase the quote because I can't remember it verbatim. But anyways, it's something along the lines of, if somebody gives you an opportunity, and that's a great opportunity, or like you've got an opportunity to do some kind of work, or you've got an opportunity to do a job, but you don't know how to actually do the job, accept the opportunity and go back and learn how to do the work, how to do the job. Like, you do not sleep until you have crossed every T and dotted every I, so that you don't disappoint this person who has given you this opportunity. And I think that's sometimes that's also another thing that, you know, we've kind of, it's another sort of solution or a challenge we've done very well, where I'll be sitting in a meeting, it's like, can you guys do this? Can we make it work this way? And I'm like, oh, I don't know, but I do know that the technology exists. I've never used, I know that the solution is out there. I just don't have it. I've never used it myself, but it's fine. Give me a day or two, I'll sort it out. I'll find a way to get it done. Just give me a day or two, because I've never used it, but I know that, I mean, there's satellites on the freaking moon. So the technology exists somewhere. And there's satellites on the moon. Like, I'm not creating anything new here. Somebody has done this before. So I'll find the software or the solution, and then we can talk about that solution once I have it. But that's, I think, you know, being solution driven and oriented is it's also a way of life. It's a culture, you know. It's how, you know, if you're stuck in traffic, do you just sit in traffic, or do you find a way to get out of traffic to make your meeting on time? You know, like, I think being solution driven is a way of life, and it permeates into every part of your life, whether personal or professional. And I see it in people on a day-to-day basis, even in my personal capacity, where I'm like, there's a problem, but you're not making solutions. Like, okay, the bride doesn't work. Okay, the bride, like, so now what? It's like, are you thinking of a solution to get us to eat dinner? Or are you just like, the bride doesn't work, so I suppose I'm Brian tonight.
We'll just stop.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I like that. And so that's going to be my last question, which I think is probably going to be linked, is if you, I mean, you already do, you've mentored so many young people. So what piece of advice do you give someone who is about to open a business? What do you feel is the most important thing they need to know?
Oof. Girl, you cannot ask me a question like that and be like, the most, like, that's a thesis long discussion. That's like, people, I'm sure if I could put that into like a thesis and be like, and go to my moderator and be like, I want to write a thesis on this particular question that you'll ask me. Because that's such a loaded question. It's like, there's a couple of things that come to mind. I think one of my favorite all-time quotes is a quote from Steve Jobs. And I'm not a particularly large fan of because he wasn't a particularly like nice guy to work with or work for. And I have an opposite kind of philosophy when it comes to work. I'm like, you can build a multi-billion-dollar company giving hugs to your employees in corridors, just being a nice, jolly, happy-go-lucky person. You can, like, we don't all have to be ruthless business people to build really good, profitable, sustainable businesses. But it's one of my favorite quotes, because it goes something along the lines of, grow up, you get told to live your life, to go to school, get a good education, get a degree, then get a good job, and then stay in your job, and then get married, and have a good, you know, family life, and have the 2.5 kids and the white picket fence, and then die at like statistical average age for, you know, your gene pool or whatever, and then that's a good life. But that's a very limited view of life. That's what he says. That's a very limited view of life, and your life can change. You know, when you realize that all the things around you everything that you know as life, that you use as life, or the apps, or the, you know, or the tech, or the infrastructure, everything that is life and living for you was made by people who are no smarter than you. And when you realize that, you also have the power to create things from nothing that other people will love, and they will use, and they will review, and they will advocate for, and it'll be like, I can't imagine life before this particular app. You know, like, you have the power to create those things for other people, you know. And that's when you start living life, when you realize that and you understand that. That's one thing I would share with everyone that wants to start something from nothing, or you've already started something and you're wondering if I should go forward or move backwards, like, it's not working the way I wanted it to, whatever. Like, always remember that you have the power to create the extraordinary, the things that other people will say is extraordinary. You have the power to do that, because everything else that has been created before you was done by people who are no smarter than you. They were not angels. They were not, you know, they were just human beings with, you know, 10 fingers, 2 arms, 1 brain. Like, we're all just human beings. And so embrace that, because you also can create that. That's what I would say. And I think the last thing that I would also say is in relation to, I think, how do I put this? It's in relation to the lessons we've learned in the last 2 to 3 years with COVID and everything, is to don't underestimate the importance of doing a risk analysis on your business. I think in the last couple of years, we've seen even big businesses go down. I think the most notable one here in South Africa is Comair. We've seen the world shut down overnight, like, globally, and that was something that was unfathomable 3 years ago. You know, if you said to a person that the world will shut down and we'll all be forced legally to stay at home, and no one will care about civil liberties. You know what I mean? There won't be a discussion about your civil liberties and whatnot, and so forth, right? You would have sounded like a crazy person if you had said that 3 years ago, but that did happen. I think the one thing that I've learned, you know, because prior to COVID, one of my other businesses was a marketing and events company. 98% of our business was face-to-face events and brand activations and the like. So when the economy shut down overnight and we all had to sit home, effectively the business shut down overnight because you couldn't do events. It was illegal, your job. So I think our jobs basically became illegal overnight. And I mean, we organize events, we don't even sell pharmaceuticals, fam. we just do events, right? So you would think it's like the least risky business. And I've learned that there's no such thing that, you know, I think we live in a world where there's so much volatility, and you can go to bed tonight and everything's fine, and tomorrow there's no bread on the shelves because Ukraine is still going into war and there's a wheat shortage or whatever, right? Or there's no petrol because the world has stopped and people are not sending petrol your way. So I'm not trying to scare people. I'm just saying that we live in a world where there's extreme volatility, and there's nobody who's not at risk anymore. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, there were businesses that were future-proofed. Like, if you have this business, you'll be fine for the rest of your life. That's not the case anymore, you know? And so don't underestimate the importance of, you know, being in touch with the world. Like, have your pulse, you know, with the world, and where is the world going, and what are the risks that no one mean for you, and solution. So every problem there is a solution. And those problems and those solutions, they create opportunities. So don't be disheartened by, you know, the overwhelm and the volatility of the world. There's still a lot of work to be done. And in that work, there's still a lot of opportunities. Your job as an entrepreneur is to find those opportunities and find a way to explore them. And if you can't do it, because I don't have a tech background, you find people who can and who believe in the same vision and mission as you do and who can do it. That would be sort of like my parting words. That was also a mouthful, good Lord.
Oh, it's wonderful though. Your mouthfuls are amazing. It must be the poetry.
I think that
The
is it. Yeah. So
definitely.
it's the poet in me.
I love that though. That was, I mean, that is basically what you're saying is don't be scared to do something because you can. And then when you're making it, just remember to keep your eyes open and
Yeah.
plan and pivot. Be ready to change because you might have to.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, right. I mean, listen to the market. I mean, I can tell you now when we built Shopapolitan, the first version of this business is when I look at what we started with and where we are now, oh, good Lord, like so different. The model is so different because listen to the market. The market will be honest with you. It's the one thing, it's the most honest and brutally honest sometimes. But the market will be honest with you and it will tell you in which direction you have to go. You just have to listen. And lastly, don't be afraid to punch above your weight. If you're trying to actually build something, and trying to make an impact, you will sometimes feel like you're in rooms where you shouldn't be. You're having discussions you don't feel like you should be having. Like I'm not really an authority on that. I think the coaches will call it imposter syndrome. But I always say that don't be afraid to punch above your weight. Oh yes, and most importantly, I nearly forgot this one. Trust the process and execute it consistently. Don't listen. There are easy ways to do things and get to a destination, but you rushing things doesn't mean you'll get there faster. It just means that you're going to frustrate yourself and the system. So trust the process. There's a reason why things take time and they have to be done a certain way. So trust the process. Don't try and rush it, because rushing to get to the destination doesn't mean you'll get there any faster. It just means you're going to frustrate yourself. You're not going to enjoy the journey. You're going to frustrate your team, your partners, and everybody around you and the entire ecosystem. And you're still not going to be where you want to be. So just trust the process and be patient with it. Everybody wants to get there faster, but people forget that things take time. It takes time to build something from nothing. And that's the delta. That's often the difference between those who get there and those who don't. Is just understanding that it does take time and it's fine. Be patient and trust the process, but execute it consistently.
Mo, that's been pure gold. Thank you. Anyone watching, if they're about to launch a business and they don't listen to those 3 points, I'm sorry for them because those were amazing. Amazing. Thank you.
Awesomeness. Oh man, always a pleasure. Thanks for listening to me.
Oh, such a pleasure. Before we sign off, if anyone watching wants to connect with you, I'll put links and stuff underneath the video, but what would be the easiest way of connecting with you?
LinkedIn is a good platform. But my name is Mo Mamele, as you can see on the screen. It's Mo Mamele on all of my social media platforms. That's Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. The easiest way to connect with me, if you want to touch base, you want to chat a bit more, you want to maybe co-create or collaborate or anything along those lines, is LinkedIn.
Awesome.
So just connect with me on LinkedIn and then DM me.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Mo. Thank you for chatting to me. Thank
Fantastic.
you for dropping so much gold today. You really did. Anyone watching this recording should walk away changed and growing. So thank you. And I hope you have an amazing rest of your day.
Fantastic. Thanks. You too. Cheers, everyone.